Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Facebook Live Lunch and Learn with the Center for African American Health. I am Yolanda Gotier, the Senior Living Health and Wellness Navigator, and I will be your host for this afternoon's Lunch and Learn. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the Center for African American Health, we are the Center for African American Health and committed to improving the health and well-being of the African American community by offering community-based, evidence-based disease prevention and disease management programs, events, and services. Right now, our staff is working remotely, but we are still available to meet whatever needs you may have. For those of you new to Facebook Live, we encourage you to put questions in the chat box and we'll address them if the time permits. And we just offer you the opportunity to just find out a little bit more about what you can do during this time of COVID-19 as you are trying to prepare meals that not only you are going to be nourishing, but foods that you're going to like. So with that, we also want to discuss eating on a limited budget. And as you know, we like our soul food, but we need to have it healthy. And so with that, we have brought in Chef Lisa Gibbons from Gourmet Away. It gives me my great deal of pleasure to have her on this chat with us. And she is a personal chef with a passion for great food. She was born and raised and steeped in a culture of a city that has some of the best food. And I mean, absolutely the best food. Not necessarily healthy, but it's still good in the absolute world. But it is the best foods from New Orleans, Louisiana. Chef Lisa has joined the center on several occasions, especially during our destination health events, where she's showcased some healthy foods and provided samples for our participants. So, Chef Lisa, can you tell me what's in my fridge and what can I do with it?
Well, so thank you guys again, the center, for having me here today. So it really depends on what's in your fridge. And what I like to tell people is to take a look at what you have in your fridge and try to keep some of the basic things in your fridge. So things like onions, bell peppers, garlic, nice, really good seasoning foods, so that you can then take some of the ingredients that you have in your refrigerator and actually create a delicious and healthy meal. Now, you can actually do that with just the food that's in your fridge, or you could do that with a combination of what you might have in your pantry. So during these times, people might be getting boxes from food pantries. So a lot of times what you're going to get is things like beans and vegetables, non-perishables. And so what I suggest is that people just be creative, even if you feel like you're not a creative, and just put together some recipes. So one of the things that I wanted to do is just to show you something very simple that I put together. I had some of these ingredients in my pantry, some in the fridge, and then I actually had to pick up a few things. So if that's okay, can we just do a quick demonstration?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna turn my camera just a little bit, just so you guys can see that. Okay, so what we're gonna do today, and the center is gonna put in the feed a link to this recipe. So I actually had some canned beans. These are black beans in my pantry. So I rinsed these off and put them back in the can. So I'm gonna put those in the bowl. Okay, now the recipe suggests that you use a low salt. So if you have an issue around salt, then I suggest you get the no salt kind. We also have a can of corn. If you have fresh corn, that would be good as well. We're gonna just mix this up a little bit. I think that's probably enough. And then we have all of the fresh veggies. So we've got some tomatoes. I had some cherry tomatoes in the fridge, and I also had a mango in the fridge. I had to actually get my bell pepper, and they have these bell peppers in the grocery now, which are a combination of red and yellow, and I thought they were quite beautiful, and they cost the same amount, so I just went ahead and bought them. So I'm going to just add those to the plate, to the bowl. Okay, and then just stir it up just a little bit. As you can see, all the beautiful contrasting colors. You know, we eat with our eyes, and so it's important to make sure that food is beautiful when we eat it. So then the next thing is a little bit of cilantro. Now, some people don't like cilantro. They feel like it has kind of a soapy kind of taste. I actually love cilantro, and so I'm going to add that. You can see that that adds some additional color. And then in this bowl, I have a combination of apple cider vinegar, lime juice, and then some olive oil. So I'm going to just pour this in the salad. And then the recipe calls for garlic, and I just decided I was going to use a little bit of garlic powder. And then this is one of my favorite seasonings. It's called adobo. You could actually find this in the grocery aisle. Usually it's in the Latin section. And so it's really a good blend. One of the things that it has in it is some turmeric. So I'm going to add a little bit of that. Stir it up really good. Okay. And then with this particular salad, you know, if you had cucumbers, if you had something else in your fridge, you could always add that to your salad. This is good as a salsa or as well as a side salad to a dish. So I'm going to just add a little bit to this bowl, okay? So you can see the way that it can be served. I'm going to move that out of the way so you guys can see that. Very simple. Took us less than, 5 minutes to put together. You do have to prep your ingredients ahead of time. And I'm just going to do a little taste just to see how it tastes. I'm sorry. You guys hear me crunching? That's really good. So you can add additional herbs to that particular recipe. If you didn't like cilantro, like I said, you could use parsley or something else. So it's a very simple recipe, a combination of things that came from my pantry as well as my fridge, and then just put it all together. So very simple. One of the other things I suggest to people during this time is to use the circulars that you get from the newspaper, because the newspaper will tell you what things are going to be on sale for the upcoming week. So when you're planning your menus, if you actually have to buy or purchase items, it's good to look at what's on sale, plan your menu around that, and then those are the items that you purchase to do your recipes.
Well, thank you. It looks amazing. And I actually have all of those things in my pantry and refrigerator. And so as soon as this is over, I'm going down to make it. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, you have to let us know how it tastes. You can put that in the feed of the Facebook Live so everybody can know how it tastes.
Absolutely. I will do that. One of the things that I noticed is that you used garlic powder instead of garlic salt. Was there a reason for that?
Well, you know, the thing is I was using a seasoning that already has salt in it. And so I didn't want to add any additional salt. You know, we have issues around hypertension. And so any opportunity that you have to remove salt is always a good opportunity to remove salt. So that's why I use garlic powder. If you're not going to use salt, then I think it would be okay to use a combination of the garlic powder with the salt.
Okay, and one of our questions coming in is it all right to use avocado in that salad?
Awesome, it would be. And what I would do is, especially if it's going to sit just for a little bit, just make sure that when you cut your avocado, toss it in some lime juice so that it'll keep better. It will be perfect in this salad. Okay,
thank you for that.
And the other thing I was going to just mention, as a dressing, one of the other things which would keep better is if you took that dressing that I made and actually blended it with some avocado, you could make an avocado dressing as well.
Okay, all right. So one of the other questions that we have is people use herbs and spices. Is there a
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah.
And does it make a difference when you add either an herb or a spice?
Yes. Okay. So herbs are actually the the leaves of plants. So if you think about things like parsley, oregano, basil, those are the leaves of a plant. A spice is more of the root or the seed of a plant. So when you think about things like chili powder or cumin, turmeric, those kinds of things. So those seasonings have more bold and robust flavors. And when you're cooking, normally, and this is a difference between things like herbs that are dried versus fresh. When you're cooking, you want to add dried herbs as well as seasonings earlier in the cooking so that you can impart the flavors. And then if you're going to finish something off with a fresh herb, those get added at the end of cooking your dish.
Okay, so if I'm making a pasta dish and I'm using fresh basil, I might
Yes,
want to wait until the end to
exactly.
just top off my dish.
Exactly. And or you
Okay,
can still stir it in at the end. And then, once you've chopped the herbs, then it actually releases the flavor, but it's better for adding those kind of fresh herbs at the end, correct?
oh, okay. Um, when I'm in the grocery store looking at the in the spice aisle,
Yes. Mm.
those little bottles can
I
sometimes be
know.
very expensive.
I know.
I saw this recipe, thought I was going to make it. It called for saffron. When I went to the store and I was like, I'm paying this for this.
Yeah. Okay.
How do we do that? How do we find those spices that fit a budget?
Okay, so here's what I'll say. Saffron is a spice to its own. Saffron just is expensive, just for a little bit, but a little bit goes a long way. So when you buy a little bit of it, you're only going to use a little bit. But another thing that you could do is I would suggest shopping at places like the Dollar Tree or at Big Lots. And this is one of those spices that came from there. These jars, which is a nice size bottle, is just $1. And so they have a wide range of dried herbs and spices. So you could actually get in there really cheap and get a whole series of spices and have those at home so that you can, make different kinds of recipes. And then the other thing I was going to suggest, if there's a recipe that you want to try and it requires some kind of exotic spice that you can't necessarily find in the grocery store, there's a place here in Denver. Actually, they have multiple locations. It's called the Savory Spice. There's one in Lowry, I know, and one downtown, but they actually allow you to buy little bags. So they will actually spoon it into a bag just so and then they weigh it. So it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you had to buy a large bottle of something. So in case you're just trying a recipe and you don't want to spend a whole lot of money, that's a suggestion that I make so that you can add that spice or that herb, but not have to pay a whole lot for it.
Well, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
One other question that we had is regarding the growing of your own herbs. Is that a
Okay.
good idea, and is it a good long-term idea?
I think it is. Last year, I actually had a garden. So I don't have a backyard, but I do have a porch. And so I bought some of these. They're actually fabric bags. They have different sizes. So they're really movable. You can put them in different places. And so it's easy to grow the herbs, and I just find that it's nice to have those kinds of additions to add to my dishes. So I suggest, if you have a yearning and really want to try it, it's very easy. Get some herbs. You don't have to try a lot of different things, but maybe some parsley, maybe some basil, and then just plant some seeds, water them, and then use them in some of your recipes. I just love pulling fresh herbs from my garden.
Okay. One other question. With the spices that we buy, is
Yes.
there a shelf life?
Yes, there is. I would suggest that you, and I don't know, I'm trying to see whether they actually put dates on these. Looks like they don't. So one of the things that you could do, especially if you know you may not be using something as often, when you get your spice, on the bottom, write in the date when you purchased it, like with a marker. And I would say probably no longer than a year you want to keep those spices. So the only way you're going to tell is to mark it, and just know that it's been sitting for a while before you actually get it into your kitchen. So I don't think they necessarily go bad, but they're definitely going to lose their flavor if you keep them a lot longer than that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. So with respect for our seniors, some of them may be homebound or just simply wanting to stay home due to COVID-19.
Right.
What would you recommend for them around access to food and possibly purchasing or receiving the pre-prepared foods? Where would they be able to get those? How do we go about making sure that that's available to them?
Right. So I know that one of the options for seniors, and it really depends on, whether they need a low cost option for food, is the Meals on Wheels program. So they will deliver a meal to the home. I know that they try to get them as nutritious as possible. And then there's an organization called hungerfreecolorado.org, and their mission really is to connect people with resources around food to make sure that hunger is not an issue for people. I actually do provide a service for meals, and it's one of those things that I do custom for people, so that's also an option as well.
Okay. So how do you get someone to believe that they are going to be full if they don't have meat at every meal?
Wow. Okay. Let me just say this. So I actually, this is probably about a year and a half since I stopped eating meat. I do eat fish and shellfish, but mostly vegetables. And so I thought this is going to be difficult. And it is harder when other people are eating those things. But what you will find is that a lot of vegetables are very high in fiber. And so when you eat those foods, they actually fill you up. I think sometimes people are concerned too about making sure that they get enough protein. So there's protein in a lot of vegetables. And so I think part of it is if you got a plate with some good tasting vegetables, and this is one of the things I'll suggest, steaming is one way, probably less flavorful. But one of the things that I like to do is cut up a lot of vegetables, toss them in some olive oil with some seasoning, and put them in a 375 oven and roast them. And so I think part of it is that people have to have a different way of preparing vegetables, because if they see them as something without a lot of seasoning, it's hard for people to say this is going to be filling for me. And so I just say, try, say a nice, probably half a plate of vegetables, and then add a healthy carb. So something like a brown rice, or something like a quinoa, which people may or may not be familiar with, but it's really kind of a seed, but a healthy grain that you can do all kinds of things to it. And it actually helps to fill you up. And it is also high in protein. So you get more protein in that than you do, say, a carbohydrate.
And what about changing, or how do we adapt our tried and true soul foods, our greens,
I know.
our cabbage?
Okay.
How do we do that?
Yeah, so I actually cook, I call it what I call the kind of food that I cook healthy comfort food. because that is different for everybody, right? So I know that we've grown up with greens. I have. And so I don't actually cook greens anymore with things like fatback or salt pork. I did have a client, he specifically asked me for that. He was really wanting that. And I cooked it for him just to make him happy. But smoked turkey legs, smoked turkey wings, or another way that you could do that. Sometimes people use turkey bacon in their greens. You know, I use vegetable broth to actually add additional flavor to the greens. You know, of course, things like onions and garlic. So you have to add additional kinds of seasonings to it to make it taste better. I do a lot of, when I cook for my clients, I do a lot of boneless, skinless chicken breasts, as well as chicken thighs. If people like them, they do have a lot more fat in them, but they have a lot more flavor as well. So you can still get a nice sear on those meats and still have kind of a crisp to them, but not deep frying them in oil, with just a little bit like a pan fry. So those are just a couple of the things that I do. But I'm always looking at ways to remove extra fat out of food, watch the amount of salt. Another thing is a good flavoring is things like lime juice and lemon juice. If you want to kind of up the flavor, even of vegetables, when you finish cooking your vegetables, squeeze a little bit of lime or lemon juice and definitely adds flavor to it so you don't have to add as much salt. And then the other thing I find is that vegetables naturally have good flavor in them anyway, so they tend to go better without adding a lot of salt to them.
We had another question.
Okay.
They'd like to know what, or do you have any vegetable blends that you would recommend? So as you're cooking things, which ones would you recommend that would be tasty and flavorful?
Okay, so one of the ones I go to a lot are broccoli, carrots, and cauliflower. And then another one, I don't know if people like Brussels sprouts. I didn't grow up eating Brussels sprouts, but I'm telling you, one of the best roasted vegetables or even pan sauteed vegetables is a Brussels sprout with a little bit of olive oil roasted on 375. And then I usually finish it off with a little bit of balsamic vinegar or balsamic reduction. Another one I do is a green bean, onion, and mushroom is another one. You can actually pan saute that, or you can roast it. I find that I roast a lot of things because I just feel like the flavor of those roasted vegetables are so much better than just doing a steaming.
Okay. Now, what about those of us with the sweet tooth? Any recommendations?
That's me too. Well, so I think an option is to try to get more fresh fruit in our diet. And I know that that might, you know, we probably hear that all the time, but when I have extra fruit left over, one of the things that I'll do is put that in the freezer, in a freezer bag. And then when I get up and make a smoothie, I like to put some of those fresh, it could be berries or it could be melons, whatever it might be, in a blender. And if you use like less liquid in there, when you blend that up, you could actually blend that almost into like an ice cream consistency, and then actually eat that versus, you know, taking it to the next level where it's a little bit more liquidy. And so, you know, it's all natural fruit. And so you got natural fruit flavors, no sugar. You really don't have to add any sugar to it. And then you've got sort of like an ice cream or a sorbet is what I guess they would call it.
Okay, sounds good. Making me hungry. So as we're about to wrap up with our last few moments,
Yes.
Are there any parting thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, so what I would say is think, you know, especially if you feel sort of challenged in the kitchen, think about it as keeping things simple, right? Use the food that you have, the food that you purchase. You know, a lot of times we purchase food and it sits and it goes bad, right? So if it's things like seasonings, if you feel like, okay, I'm not going to use this onion and bell pepper, chop those things up, put them in a bag, put a date on them, and put them in the freezer so that you don't lose those things, right? You know, when you're shopping, shop for the food that you want to eat. And then cook and prepare that food. And then I also say prepare, especially if it's something you really like, double the recipe. And then take a portion of that food out, package it, put a label on it, put it in the prepared food section of your freezer versus putting it in with like all of the raw meats and stuff, so you know what foods you have, you've dated it, and then you can pull it out and eat it. So keep it simple, you know, get use out of the food that you're preparing so that you can have it more than one time.
Okay, we've had two questions.
Okay.
One is, how do we cook our greens and cabbage without cooking out all of the flavor and the vitamins and minerals?
Okay, so I actually have a recipe, and this is for collard greens, and I think you could do the same thing with cabbage. I slice my collard greens very, very thin. I mean, like super thin, like that thin, right? And so I just put a little bit of oil or fat, you know, in the pan, saute them. If you're going to add a little bit of meat to it, you know, maybe some turkey bacon or something, and then saute it and then pull it out. I mean, we're used to eating it overcooked, but we don't have to do that. And always remember, you still have to add a little bit of vinegar to that, maybe just a little bit of sugar because they're going to be a little bit more bitter. And you can even finish it off with a little bit of vegetable or chicken broth. But I think it tastes very good. It's going to be not as soft, but it'll be delicious.
Okay, and our final question was, any ideas for a savory snack?
A savory snack. Okay. I love popcorn personally. So I would say I actually I buy popcorn in a bottle and I pop it myself. And I think putting it with some other snacks like some nuts, maybe even like some Chex Mix or something like that might be a good savory snack to try.
Okay, well, thank you, Chef Lisa.
You're
and
welcome.
As we move through our last couple of minutes, just remember that you have had this Lunch and Learn with the Center for African American Health with Chef Lisa as our guest. And for those of you who are in need of any resources or assistance, please reach out. I specifically work with seniors, and so any seniors out there who need anything, reach out to me. Yolanda Gotier at the Center for African American Health. There will be links at the end of this Facebook Live. And we just want you all to know that we're all in this together. COVID-19 is not going to get us down. We are going to always rise up. And thank you so much for tuning in today. Thanks, Chef Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
And bye.
Bye-bye.